Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch. I'm just going to put my glasses on. I'm not really fooling anyone. I pretend that I don't need them, but I definitely do. I'm Gillian Joseph, as Deborah said, and I'm going to be chairing the panel of broadcasters for the afternoon session. Diamond broadcasters are all leaders in their field. The great and the good you have before you this afternoon. Just by way of introduction, we'll start with Alex Mahon. She's been the Chief Executive of Channel 4 since October 2017. She's the first female CEO of a major UK broadcaster. One of the first people to publicly congratulate Alex on her new job was the diversity crusader, Baroness Floella Benjamin, who said she tweeted that Mahon will be brilliant as she's all-embracing and a driver of diversity. Please welcome Alex. Next to Alex, we've got Gary Davey, Sky's Managing Director Content. As such, he's responsible for the production and acquisition across 8 genres of TV, drama, comedy, factual arts, news, movies, and children's programming, and virtual reality. He's also Sky's diversity champion. Is that how we describe you? Is that a title that I've just given you? Okay, I haven't made it up. He's seen the company ranked 3rd in the inclusive top 50 UK employers 2018-19 list, and the top media company in Stonewall's top 100 employer 2019. If you'd like to welcome Gary to the panel. James Currell, next to Gary, is Executive Vice President, Managing Director for Viacom International Media Networks UK, Northern and Eastern Europe. He oversees all media networks and related businesses in 33 European countries. CDN's aims to double the percentage of disabled people working in British television by 2020. He said, "This is an important initiative which puts a much-needed spotlight on the underrepresentation of disabled employees in the British broadcast sector." Charlotte Moore. Oh, we'll give you a round of applause as well. Sorry. Charlotte, next to James, is the BBC's Director of Content. She was appointed to this role in early 2016 when she assumed responsibility for all of the BBC's television channels after the controller posts were abolished. Described as a splendidly talented individual and tipped to be the next Director General of the BBC. Being able to look across the channels to see how we can bring diversity into the mainstream and bring new faces to the channels is really important, so has said Charlotte. Welcome, Charlotte, to the panel. And last but not least, Asif Zubairy, Commissioning Editor Entertainment at ITV. He started in television production in 1984 and has worked across all programming genres. He's worked for Paramount, Walt Disney, and the 9 Network Australia. Asif believes that the more diverse commissioners there are, the more diverse content there will be. There are not enough people of diverse backgrounds in positions of power. It's in every business interest to have as diverse a makeup as possible. Welcome them all to the panel. So we know why we're here. We're going to be discussing diversity within the broadcasting industry and how we measure that in terms of data particularly. If I come to you first, Gary, describe for me the importance of the Diamond Project and what brought it about in the first place.
I think John mentioned this earlier. I think in the old days, each of us had our own data collection methodologies, which were sort of useful internally, but not terribly useful as an industry-wide proposition. And it was not possible to sort of put them together because they were all counted very differently. So it was important that we had an industry-wide approach, and I was very pleasantly surprised about the openness and the preparedness of people who are normally tearing one another's throats out, actually, to sit together and find solutions to that problem. Because I think we all understood that we needed to have an evidence-based approach to this. We need data to make meaningful change. We're still on a journey, but I think we're off to a very good start in terms of the measurement and then having data that is strong enough for then us to act upon.
And Alex, what is the data telling us? And what use can we put it to?
So I guess first, it may sound trivial now, but if you think how difficult it was to set this up 4 or 5 years ago when Una King and the team were putting it together for the first time. So I guess the first thing is we've got statistically significant data that's collected across multiple places and that appears to be reliable. So that may sound trivial, but that's a big thing to achieve. I don't think any other country worldwide has that. So it's sort of that base of doing it, but someone will no doubt correct me if I'm wrong. Second is that we need a higher response rate. So we need to work out ways to continue encouraging, incentivizing producers to complete, because that's hard to do. So as we get towards using the data more, we're going to need more data so that we can go into the statistics and what they mean. So we need that. And then thirdly, it shows us where the gaps are and what each of us need to work on to improve.
And James, what are those gaps as far as you can tell at the moment?
For the industry as a whole, I think that the data shows us that progress is being made, but as we've heard earlier today, that there's plenty more that needs to be done. But I do think that the suddenly the availability of data from Diamond, but also from other initiatives like the Ofcom surveys and various parliamentary initiatives like gender pay, suddenly in this area we have more diversity and inclusion data than we've ever had, a transparency in what's actually going on in our organisations and in the industry as a whole, and something that we can hold ourselves and each other accountable for. And I think I think it's the trigger for further positive change.
Charlotte, do you think that the BBC reflects sufficiently the audience that it commands?
I think, again, we've all talked about, and I'm sure today you've talked about the fact there is huge improvements, and I think you only have to look at the screen and watch the programme to see that there is a massive improvement. And I think Diamond has given everyone focus. I think, obviously, as Alex said, the data, we need to make sure we really get people to get behind actually filling in all the forms so that that data becomes even more granular and even more, credible data. But because I think some of the data we're seeing is backing up that we are making improvements as well. And you can see it on screen, and you can see it by the programmes which bring greater diverse audiences to actually want to watch the programmes we're making. So I think you can see great change happening. I think off-screen, I think we all know in terms of sort of peopling all our productions, and this is not just within the BBC, but obviously with throughout the whole indie sector, and all of us as broadcasters wanting to make sure that we increase diversity off-screen as well. I think that will continue to mean that that's really sustainable change, and that actually while Diamond will help amplify and motivate people to it and focus people's minds and make sure that we're checking which areas are we doing better in and which are we not, I think it will genuinely, if you have enough diverse people working, and I mean that in its greatest sense, working behind camera as well, will mean that you sustainably kind of change the industry and the programmes being made, and therefore the audiences coming to them. So, I'm a real optimist, and I think we've seen great change in 5 years. We've seen what coming together as broadcasters has really done in a really united sense. And I think it is making change, and I think it's very exciting to think where we could go next. I mean, disability on screen is not where we want it to be yet, and I think definitely disability behind the camera is not where we want it to be. And then I think where there's diversity within diversity as well, and making sure that we really look at all the different groups, which again, that detail which Diamond can give us will begin to identify which groups are not being represented. Does that, there's lots to talk about, but I think we can all see where there needs to be greater change, and I think this is a great, continues to be a great focus for that change.
Asif, we use the term diversity, but really it's about normality, isn't it? It's about reflecting society as it is. Diversity perhaps is a little bit of a problematic term because it sort of suggests the other and bringing the other in. Do you prefer the term normality?
Well, inclusion I would go for, really, because it's just including everybody so you get a representative group that represents the rest of the country. So it's not diversity. It's just everyone was trying to say black or disabled or whatever it is, and diversity was quite a polite way of putting it. Like urban.
Yeah, lots of connotations for urban there, aren't there? In terms of recruitment, that I would imagine is one area in which, you know, the stats and the data will inform how members of the panel approach gaining new talent within their various industries. Alex, if you could speak to that, how instructive the data can be and how practical it can be.
So are we talking about diamond data on screen, or are we talking about off screen?
Well, both.
Okay,
both.
so like the way I try and think about it at Channel 4 is you've got in the building, you've got production and behind the camera, and then you've got on screen. So, you know, there's two elements of off screen, right? There's people who work at Channel 4 and there's people who work at suppliers and production companies, and we work with a couple of hundred of them a year. And then there's what you see on screen. So Diamond's measuring, mainly what we talk about with Diamond is on screen. But we're measuring particularly as well what that is within Channel 4. So it's my view that it can be very hard to change in the building for any broadcaster, but that once you do, that has a flow through to all other decisions on production companies and on screen. And to Asif's point, the greater variability of background you get in the group of people making decisions, the greater that diversity of output will be. All studies show that, right? And all studies show that you'll be more commercially successful if you have that variability of backgrounds in the people who make decisions. So we then measure now not only what our staff are, we measure that at a general population level, and we measure that at a kind of Channel 4 leaders level. We have targets for both of them, and we also measure who is applying for what jobs and what the success rate is of people as they come through from those populations into the jobs. Because the issues, as you will know, within companies are not just how you pipeline in, how you bring new people into the company who are often at a junior level. The issues when you get into companies are often ones of retention and progression. So if you're in any underrepresented or othered group, the people above you tend to be the same who are making the decisions, and therefore the blockers come often into getting progressed into the more senior roles. So we have a real focus on that for senior women, and we have a real focus for that on Black, Asian, minority, ethnic. That's where we're focused in the building. We've been very, very public about that and about the blockers.
You mentioned targets. Do you have actual
targets
that you can share?
Yeah, we have targets. So we have a 20% BAME target across all levels. So the most difficult area to achieve that in historically has been for senior staff. And then we have a 50% female on the top 100, because there's a real focus on the sort of top of the pyramid. So that's a big effort for us to achieve, and it actually means that we therefore have to start preparing the pipeline of candidates and focusing on how we progress them and develop them. And that's, in my belief, that's the sort of biggest level of change that's hard to do. And it doesn't kind of come from a trickle down of just announcing it. It comes from significant actions and changes throughout the way we run our culture.
I wonder if the rest of the panel could speak to the issue of targets and the accusation that really with targets being set, it's a positive discrimination, perhaps in a negative sense, in that perhaps not the most qualified people will get the jobs, but because they tick a box, they will be given a chance. Should we start at Charlotte? Whoever wants to take it first.
I mean, the whole point of everything we're doing is not to do it just to tick a box. I mean, to be honest, the culture within the BBC is absolutely, we're all committed, particularly in the content division. I mean, I can speak for that, but I think throughout the BBC, that this is not a tick box exercise. This is very, very real. And actually, there's a fantastic creative case for it, and I think all of us would agree with this makes sense. If you want to get audiences, and as you say, and include all audiences in Britain, you need to make sure you're making the right programmes. The way to do that is to have the right people making the programmes, the right people deciding what programmes to make. So, you know, that is, there's no point in doing it in a tick box way, because you might fill a target one year, but you won't the next. So we are all committed to really making sure that that comes throughout the business, both at leadership level, so the people who are making the decisions, and I think our Assistant Commissioner programme has been incredibly successful at that. In the last few years, the numbers of people who've gone on to get jobs, we've opened up the opportunity, and therefore when jobs have become available, they've gone for it and they've been ready to get those jobs. So it's not about putting people in jobs who then won't be able to do the job, it's about helping people be absolutely fit and ready to be able to take on those jobs. So I think some of the positive inclusion has been a really good way of making sure that people do get that exposure. As we all know, so much of getting the job that's a senior post is having the experience to do it. So we've tried to fast track that experience by opening up more opportunity. And I think that is from interview level as well. I think when we're interviewing, we go, rather than thinking of the person that first comes to mind that you might want to kind of tap up, rather than just waiting to see who applies, because we know if people don't think there's enough people like them in roles, they're not going to apply. But if you literally go out and think, let's go and make sure that we have a really fantastic range of people applying for this job and not just going for the people you first think of, that already allows more people to have more experience in the interviews, more chance of getting the job, and so forth. So trying to do it at every level is the only way we're going to make change. And I think that really is happening.
Asif, I think you wanted to come in.
ITV, we do a regular employee kind of survey. We didn't do one last year, but we're working on one for this year. And I'm working with the people who are doing the survey to have some questions in for people who identify as either BAME or disabled, to then ask them whether what they think about their career prospects are in ITV, because anecdotally it feels like the business is slightly like a pint of Guinness, where everything dark is down at the bottom and all the white stuff's at the top. But you need facts and data to make sure that's the case. So we'll be finding out whether people who are BAME and disabled feel like they have a career chance within ITV. And if they don't, and if we get a load of response that says we don't, then we know what we've got to work with.
James?
Yeah. I do, and I was lauding the fact that we've got data and we can measure our performance. And I think that's a good thing. I think that transparency is a great thing. I think there is, to your point about sort of tokenism and tick boxing, I think merely obsessing about the data and focusing on the data, I think you miss things. I think along with the data being right, you have to focus on the culture and the culture of inclusion. Something we do work very hard at Viacom with training courses and various initiatives to create the right kind of inclusive culture where everybody feels welcome, feels able to do their best work, and I do think that is just as critical as looking at the data and seeing how we're performing by the numbers.
Gary?
We have targets very similar to those that Alex mentioned. About the same. So 20% on screen and 20% off screen, and obviously 50-50 on gender in the top echelons of the company. I think your point about progression is the most challenging part of this whole area. I was talking about this earlier. We've identified one really difficult area, and that is in the writing category, where we as an industry are going to have to invest quite a lot to develop a new generation of young, diverse writing talent to service the industry's going forward needs. And I think that's a good example of where the Diamond data became very useful for us. I mean, it identified a really big gap in what we were doing. We thought we were doing well, but that identified a problem, as was the disability question. I don't think anybody really has got any ambition to tick boxes. The issue is much more serious than that.
Alex, you wanted to come back on the target question?
No, well, it's a very common question, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, if you have targets, does that mean you're just going to put people in jobs who fit the criteria? It is not my life's experience that you find bad candidates. It is not my experience, and I doubt it's the experience of anyone here, that you find that if you work hard enough, a suitable pool of well-qualified, experienced candidates are not out there. They are. Everyone in this room knows that. This is a group of people who are interested in this topic. The question is upon us to make sure that we're doing the hard enough work to change how we recruit and to ensure that we are developing people's careers appropriately. It is a myth that there aren't good enough people out there.
Let's get back to the data, and I want to talk about programme diversity data. Perhaps if I kick off with you again, Gary, we know that we're not having that published, are we?
No, this is something that is a very important principle for the Diamond Project. I think when you look, you get down to very detailed data, program by program, or indeed production company by production company, there is a very real risk of identifying individuals. I said this earlier, do we have something to hide? Damn right we do. The identity of the individuals.
But they aren't, it is anonymous though, isn't it?
Well, it's anonymous except if you see a piece of data that says the director of photography has a learning disability, that's something that person may not want to be published. Or if you have a director who declares themselves to be gay, they may not want that published. But clearly they are identifiable once you get down to program level data. So the principle is we have to defend the anonymity of the data at all costs. First of all, if we don't, we will be betraying the 40-odd thousand people who've signed on to Diamond, and it will inhibit the next wave of people in the industry who have yet to sign on to it. So the security of the data, both the physical security and the anonymity of the individuals, is fundamental to the whole project.
But James, Diamond are looking at role level data collection. That's something for the future. What are the benefits of that, and how soon will we arrive at being able to glean some results from that?
Well, I think we agree as a board on CDN, and we agree in the idea of transparency. I think transparency drives positive outcomes. To build on Gary's point, we want to be as transparent as we can. So you'll see, as I think you saw in the second cut of Diamond data, is going a step further than we did in the first. And the third cut of data that comes out in a few months' time will go further yet. So you'll be able to slice or we'll present the data by role type, by genre, and indeed by broadcaster, as we talked about this morning. So it is a stage further. But as Gary said, to back up that, I think that it would be wrong of us, very wrong, to go down to program level data simply because it would infringe the privacy of the people whose trust we need to make Diamond what we want it to be, and completely counterproductive to our push for greater engagement and participation with the survey.
Charlotte, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything which means that people don't want to fill in the form because they think you're going to expose them would be terrible, because the whole point is we want to encourage people to fill in the form. So, the BBC, we're very committed to being as transparent as possible, and within that, it's very important that if that's going to encourage people to change and actually focus on, I think the next level that you're talking about with the third cut, to be able to see which roles are we managing to increase off-screen data or on-screen data, and which roles are we not. As a rule, we're very good to be able to focus. So, recently, as Gary was talking about, we've had our Writers' Access Scheme for Disability, and that's been a great way of focusing us on, how we're going to make sure we've got more disabled writers coming through to write more authentic parts, not just for our continuing dramas, but beyond. Our writers' rooms that we're doing also increase, writers from different backgrounds writing with different subjects. So all of these things, we think we're going to make improvements there, but I'm sure the next cut of that Diamond data will show us, well, you might be making improvements there, but here's another area you really need to focus on, which might be director of photography. We all know it's incredibly hard to find enough people for enough projects from different backgrounds in very particular roles like that. So I think, again, if that pushes us to really be able to focus on the next place we all need to turn our attention to, fantastic. And I think we all want to be as transparent as possible in order to be able to make those changes and apply that focus. As a group of broadcasters, it's going to be really helpful, because the more we can do together to help people move between programmes and between broadcasters, the better.
And Asif, sort of looking at your experience, what areas do you think the role level data might highlight when you're able to look at that information?
Well, pretty much what I said at the outset, the quote that you read, that there's not enough people, not enough decision makers from backgrounds that are non-white, basically. So that data will help. And just to go back to the point about, this is partly a numbers thing, isn't it? About, I agree that there might be a case where we might never be able to get down to program level, but isn't this the argument for why more people should fill in the forms? Because we might be able to get it at least to genre level, where you can't identify people, individuals, but you can get an even better sense of a trend or a pattern.
Let's talk about diversity. I'm conscious of the, not diversity, disability, conscious of the time, and I wanted to get this in. I think in one of the morning sessions, it was described as often being classed as the poor relation of diversity. That's a quote from this morning. Alex, I think that the panel would agree that there's a lot lacking in the portrayal of disability amongst the broadcasters. What is being done?
I don't know if you'd say that if you watched the last leg win at the RTS Awards last night. You know, when you see a show, they had a big night out.
I'm a fan of the last leg.
Yeah, but the last leg's a really interesting example, right, of Channel 4 having a set of presenters with disabilities that has moved from a piece about the Paralympics to just a really bloody good Friday night show that wins entertainment awards on the basis of being a really good show. That's the kind of aspiration that I think we all want to be at, that is representative and is mainstreamed. You know, we had the Paralympics up for awards there as well. I mean, Channel 4, in a delightful way, has had a good track record on that. Now we're signed up to the Doubling Disability Pledge. Now we are focused on how do we push ourselves further, particularly in areas like the Paralympics, in terms of the people that work on the production. You know, so we're really focusing on how do we really increase the number of people on the production team who have registered disabilities. How do we change that? How do we change the pipeline of them coming through? That's a big thing for us to really focus on. So I don't think it is a poor cousin, if that was a sort of phrase in that sense. Not for us. I think that's, you know, it's always a challenge for all broadcasters to work out how do we improve. But I think if you'd seen those guys last night, you wouldn't have said that this is a kind of broadcast. And you said that's our flagship entertainment show. You know, incredibly proud of it. But because it's not a specialist show. You know, and that's a real example of where this can change perceptions.
That's the key, though, isn't it? That it isn't a specialist show. Gary, in terms of Sky, what's your commitment and your aspirations for coverage in this respect?
Well, as part of Diamond, we are all committed to the Doubling Disability program. It's an area that we've identified that needs a lot of work, both on camera and off camera, and in our broader community of people. We've been very focused from a prioritisation point of view on gender, where we had a lot of work to do. BAME and disability now is being taken as a very serious priority. There are lots of things we can do that are in motion now, but I think the fact that we've embraced this idea of doubling representation on such a short time frame keeps me awake sometimes about how we're going to do that, but we're committed to doing it.
James?
Yeah, well, the pledge has been made, doubling disability within, I think we have 2 years left, so it's something for everybody to hold us accountable for. And we've got Diamond data to illustrate when we hit the mark. It's something that we have done a lot of work on within Viacom, particularly in our in the workplace where we were falling short. A place where we brought in consultants to help us. Actually, Graham Whippy, who's in the building here, did some work. Where's Graham? Is he there? He's gone. Helped us, and like other of my colleagues on the panel here, got our disability confidence accreditation. And really, I guess the focus of the work was to understand what were the barriers within our organisation that prevented either people with disability joining us or progressing through the ranks. It was very important, very valuable piece of feedback that allowed us to shape our policies and practices to just make ourselves better. And I'm pleased to say that as a result of that, we have seen some good progress through the Diamond data and through the Ofcom data regarding disability.
Charlotte, what are you hearing from those with disabilities and those without about where we are now and where we should be?
That I think we know we need to do more both on screen and off screen. I think it's very much it's an area which we need a lot more focus on screen. We've had our disability presenters program that we ran with JJ and Steve Brown, and that's been very successful at then giving experience on lots of different programmes across the BBC to then make sure there's enough work for them and enough really interesting work, and they develop as presenters. You know, really making each genre think about, they've all got their targets to try and increase on-screen and off-screen representation. So they're working very hard on that at the moment. And I think you can see it again, whether that's Jerk through comedy or whether that's Nikki Fox through Factual. You can see people coming through as on-screen presence, you know, in a more than just one role. I think it's really important as well. It's not the same people. We need again a range of people with different skills across all the genres. We did a class act, which was basically putting together a group of actors who would then be available, you know, as sort of all their CVs, their casting tapes, they're actually getting them fit and ready to kind of be able to go out to people when we know that roles are available. So we're trying to, and then also the writing scheme to make sure that roles are being written with them in mind. So again, trying to really work across the board in every genre to make sure that everybody is aware of where they need to get to, and putting a real focus both in a kind of positive experience and schemes for people, but also making sure that those turn into roles. From a decision making, again, our assistant commissioners, Julie Shaw in daytime, has been fantastic at helping us across all of the content division, because she's very much in a senior level in the commissioning team, but of course, you know, her influence is beyond just the programmes she's commissioning. She's absolutely helping us all try and make sure that we change that. And we're just today, our new assistant commissioner scheme will start rolling out, and again, I think disability will be a big part of that. I think partly doing it in a way which is creating opportunities on screen and going proactively out to find ideas led by either off-screen talent that really have got something they want to talk about, a voice, things that they want to talk about. So the subject is about disability, but also making sure that disability is within the mainstream as well, whether that's Country File or Watchdog or Supermarket Secrets or whatever the programme might be. So my real belief is you have to do these things across everything. You do it in a very focused way, but you also make sure it's there, you know, through news, through sport, through, you know, it really is, you know, I think like the last leg, through entertainment. It's incredibly important that we're sort of, these things are, as you say, it's normal for everybody to see people represented in all their different ways. So there's a lot being done.
In the area of entertainment, we've seen the success of Last Leg, where the disability of the presenters or whoever the contributors are is incidental to the entertainment, the quality of the show. I mean, presumably that's something that you would strive to achieve.
Absolutely. I mean, to be frank, we're aware that we are not good enough when it comes to disability, and it's something that we are aiming to address. We're using diamond figures to talk to production teams, and a good example, our ITV's output aims to, whether it's entertainment or factual, is to say, look at big issues through ordinary people's eyes. And I was really heartened when the Newcomer of the Year award at the NTAs this year went to a young actor with cerebral palsy who plays a big part in Emmerdale. And we don't make a big deal out of it, but that's the ITV way, and that's the way it should be as well. It's just incidental. But so we're hopeful, but we are aware we've got a long way to go.
I can see Deborah getting up, and she's got her stick. She warned me about that stick. So what I'd like the panel to do for me now is just really to sum up in a few words where you would like to see the results of the data. What would you like to have achieved in the next 5 years' time? Broad question, I know, but I'll start with you first of all.
So for us, I think that's about using the data to educate ourselves, to do everything we can to make the organisation authentic and inclusive, which is then changing the balance of people we have and ensuring that that balance flows through all the decision making creatively. You know, and that's a cultural task and one that takes a lot of work to do, but it will have the lasting effect on how these things are done.
Gary.
As an internal optimist, in 5 years from now, I hope we've stopped talking about it and that it's business as usual. Sadly, I suspect my optimism might be a little bit overstated, but nonetheless, that's where we should hope to get to.
Thank you. I think solving one of our biggest challenges within this time frame. higher level of representation of diverse groups in senior decision-making roles in the industry?
Yeah, I think we all want to get to a point, don't we, where it's a genuinely an inclusive industry throughout every genre, on screen, off screen. It genuinely feels like it represents the country, both in the people who make it, the people who are, on screen, and then the people who are watching it, and that feels, that's what we want to get to. So we genuinely represent it. I'm an optimist as well, actually. I think we've come a long way. I think it's very exciting what's changing. You can see it. You can see it at every award ceremony. You go, God, how brilliant! The industry's changing. When you look at the tapes across everybody's output, you go, it has changed. So I think we can get there.
Not that I don't like being here. It will be in 5 years' time not to have conferences like this, basically. But can I just tell you one thing that I did like is that one of the nicest things that happened to me recently was I was in a casting session for Take Me Out, which is an ITV show that I look after. And the casting people, before they showed me all their photos of all the cast that they wanted to use, they said, and anticipating your requirement for diversity, I can assure you we've got 6 out of the 30 girls won't be white. So I didn't have to even ask. And that is a real win. So that should become normal. People shouldn't have to say, just to preempt your question, we've already done it. They should just already do it.
Brilliant. Cheered by the optimism of the panel. Thank you very much for taking part in this debate. And thank you for listening. I know there's an online forum for questions in general that you can feed into.
I have one question. Not from me, so don't start. It's from the audience. It was from Twitter. So there's a question that asks, why are there no disabled comedians on Have I Got News For You, 8 out of 10, etc., etc., etc. Do we know why that is?
Well, I think there needs to be.
There we go.
There should be. And I think, I think Nikki's been Have I Got News For You. I mean, again, talking to people who want to be on, Liz says she doesn't want to go on it. Liz Carr,
no,
but,
Liz,
so
Liz,
people
right.
are very specific about what shows they actually
Yeah.
want to do and what they don't. But absolutely. Cool. I don't know why they're not.
That was a
There
question.
should be.
That was just one question from the audience.
Yeah, but you know what? But that conversation is being had with every producer that we work with. But
Gary,
come
what
on,
can I
come on, you've got to. So again, I think you don't need the program level data. You can see it, can't you? It's there, and they are absolutely that's a conversation that's being had with everyone that we work with.
Thank you. Gillian, thank you so very much indeed.
You're very welcome.
They are a motley crew, but they're my motley crew. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to all the broadcasters.